Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. This is the It's All Just Marketing podcast. I'm your host, Tim Warren, and today I have Scott Suter. Welcome to the podcast, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Happy to be here.
So Scott, just real quick, give us your role, title, what you do.
Yeah.
So for the people listening.
For sure. Yeah. So I'm a sales director here at Helium. Super excited to be chatting with you today. Long time coming. I've been here for a long time. Known you through a lot of the phases of the company, and
man.
Hopefully we'll know you through the continual growth of the company and reaching 100 million. So I'm pumped to be starting this project and part of it.
Yeah, man. No, it's great. You were one of the first people hired at the company in general. I remember Eric and I were kind of, he was like, yeah, there's maybe 8 people in a small office. And I was like, man, when Scott started, there was like 2 people at a small office. We were really small.
That's right.
Even smaller.
When I showed up late, everybody knew I was late.
Yeah, because there was like 3 of us.
That's right.
So yeah, man, good. It was good days. And I remember that for the people listening, like you were such early days that it was like the original shared office space, 4 of us packed in a small office. Mm-hmm. And we were in a shared space, so the office would always complain at us and yell at us for being too loud,
That's right.
making too much noise, right? Because they're like lawyers in our shared space. We're like, keep it down. I'm trying to be stuffy and be quiet. We're
right.
like,
stop having fun.
Yeah, stop having fun. We're like, we're a bunch of young tech guys. Like, we're
That's
having
right.
a good time, right? And they're like, you guys should move to a new space. We're like, maybe we should move to a new space.
Right.
Yeah, remember those days. Well, hey man, the podcast is all about marketing and what's working in marketing, right? And obviously sales is part of marketing, but we do at Helium, we do a lot of email marketing. Right. Email marketing is one of the major forms of marketing that we do. And you've been, doing email marketing for 5 years now, right? At least.
Yeah.
So I'd love to just park on that at the beginning of, what you've seen that's working, good, bad, and ugly, right? There's all kinds of email marketing. But in email marketing, what have you seen recently, like in the last maybe 6 months, like what's working in email marketing?
Yeah, great question. And you're 100% right. It's kind of our primary lead gen source, right? And it's funny because, back in the early days when I first started, it was I was a little touchy when people responded negatively to my emails. Like, leave me alone, shut up. Like things that just like, let me spend a day trying to craft a retort to this nasty email I received. But I think one of the kind of cornerstone just elements of email marketing is the ability to kind of compartmentalize the good and the bad, right? So for starters, you want to be able to sift through the things that upset you and not
Yes.
let them upset you.
Yes.
And then double down on the things that do work. So that segues us nicely into, I'd say, like recently what we've seen success in is, understanding that when people open their email, they're taking their valuable time out of their valuable day to respond to you in some way, right? So whether that's negative or positive, you have disrupted their flow in some capacity. Being aware of that as you reach out initially is super crucial. And what we've tried to do with a lot of intentionality is add value at every step of the way, right? So we'd like to keep the emails very short. We don't want to make them read for a minute this great big long email of all the things that we're offering and
right.
different things along those lines. So we follow a couple of core principles, but some of the ones that I personally follow are kind of like a punchy title to my email, right? Something that gets them to open it. And then leading with, basically something to the extent of, I don't want a lot of your time. I don't want a lot of your attention. All I really would love to do is figure out, hey, is there an opportunity for us to talk? Is this something that you might be interested in? And leading with some sort of value, right? Whether that's an offer, whether that's, hey, here's a gift card, here's a pair of AirPods, I'll send you a competitive report, I'll build you a piece of content, like
Yep.
whatever we think might work there. And we do test a lot of different things.
Yeah.
But ultimately it's about appealing to, I think, what their interests are and what would be valuable for them. And then asking for a small amount of time, 15 minutes, 10 minutes.
How do you decide what your initial offer is going to be, right? Because, and just to clarify for the listeners, there are 2 types of email. There's cold email and there's warm email, right?
That's right.
So like a warm email or a double opt-in is when somebody comes to a website, fills out the thing, it says, yes, I want to receive your emails. And they get an email saying, did you confirm that you want to receive your email? Yes, I want to receive your emails. And so that's that, like, I got onto your email drip campaign, right? There's that. And then, which we can do. But then there's also the cold email outreach, which is we really want to get into this brand, right? We want to work with XYZ brand. And so we'll use Zoom info. We'll find the people we want to target. And we can run ads to those people as well too, right? We can LinkedIn ads, we can run Facebook ads, we can run Google ads. But then there's also this idea of a cold email outreach. How do we email market to them as well? And so you're talking a lot about the cold email outreach when we're trying to reach out. So So how do you craft those offers, right? So whether it's offering someone, hey, if you meet with me for 15 minutes, I'll send you AirPods, which is worth a couple $100, right? Or,
That's right.
which is a valuable offer. Or some people say, I don't want your AirPods, right? Like I want a competitive analysis. Or some people say, I don't want any of those. I want you to go away, right?
Yeah, right.
How do you decide what to offer to somebody when you've not met them before?
Yeah, that's a phenomenal question. The way we kind of think about it is, I guess we start with universalism. What does everybody like? Well, they like, technology, right? So does a pair of AirPods appeal to them? Some people will be like, I can buy my own AirPods. You're like, okay,
right.
That's perfectly fine. Can
Or
you
they're
do your own
Amish,
SEO?
and they're like, I can't use AirPods. That's fine. Yeah. Why do you have a computer?
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's been kind of systematic of like, I think whittling down to like what is the right value exchange, right? So AirPods, originally it was working for us really, really well, and then it kind of became like, that's a lot of money that you're offering me. I'm not sure this feels okay.
Right.
Okay, fine. So then we kind of narrowed it down to a $50 Amazon gift card, right? So for $50, that feels a little more realistic. Okay, this is a prospect that maybe is a part of a $25 million company and not a $500 million company. So $50 seems more appropriate, right? And so then you appeal to somebody there, and the responses come in, and then eventually those, maybe whittle their way down as well. And then kind of also testing out, hey, what level of strategic value can I offer you? Can I offer you competitor analysis? Can I show you, hey, here's 25% of a full blown keyword research project that we would run for your business that I can build in 10 minutes, ultimately for you to kind of show you insight as to where you're missing, where your competitors are not missing, and then we can talk through the strategy of how to get you to where you need to be. So spending the right amount of time, on a phone call with them and adding the right amount of value in that very first touch point is really what opens up the door a lot of times to that second conversation, which again is, in my opinion, the most important conversation you're going to have with a client. We have a very, very quick touch point to build trust, establish authority for 15 minutes, and then we set up our second call, which is where we're going to do the discovery and which is where we're going to start talking about dollars. And that to me is the most important call that we have with the prospect.
So you mentioned one thing, Scott, that stood out to me, which is keeping it short. When I see a lot of outreach emails, right, or just I get emails all the time, but a lot of them are, "Hey Tim," and then some platitude, right? "Nice to meet you," or "How are those Reds?" And it's like, 27 paragraphs of every service, and I as a busy executive, right, what I do is I look for the delete button and I just delete and move on, right? Like I'm not going to read this super long email. But to your point, short emails, right? Because for me, this is one of the things that when you're marketing to executives, one of my biggest issues is decision fatigue. Like I can only make so many good decisions in a day. That's right. Before my ability to make good decisions goes out the window because I'm just too tired, right? Because I've been making decisions all day. And so to your point, when I get that email, it's much easier to make the decision of like, nope, I'm not gonna think about this right now.
That's right.
Right. And so you can shorten and reduce that decision fatigue by making the decision to read the email easy, right? Because to your point, the title's catchy and it's short, right? So I can make the decision to at least read and engage with this, right? But then to your point, it's the shorter it is, the easier it is for the person to decide to actually respond to it.
That's right.
Right? Because there's just 3 decisions in a row. Decision 1, do I even read this?
Right.
Or even engage with this, right? Or if I see the subject line like "Dear Sir, Madam," like delete, right? If you don't even know, if you look at me and you have no idea like whether I'm Sir, Madam, and you're offering guest posting, I'm already out, right? Because it's like I've read the thing and I know I'm out, right? But then there's a second piece of like I have to decide to even read it. When I see your subject line of guest blog posting, I know I'm out. I know I'm going to delete that because I'm like, this is just spam, right? But the second one is when I open it, then I have to decide to actually read it.
That's right.
And then the third thing is I have to decide to respond to it. Like what do I say back and forth, right? So interested. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on you keeping it short, why that works, what you've seen as you've tried and played around with shorter versus longer.
Yeah. One of the things that I try to just kind of keep in mind is, again, as we talked about, we're interfering with the flow of their day, right? If you're walking through the mall and somebody tries to grab you to come over and test their hand lotion, 9 times out of 10, I'm actively going somewhere in the mall. I'm not just wandering around. I don't have just time to test hand lotion.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, I'm retired.
That's right.
Sure, let me try all your hand lotions.
So I have to think about it from the perspective of like I'm getting in front of them and disrupting them in some way, right? Chances of them being in the process of that moment searching for an SEO company is virtually zero, right? They're probably not actively Google searching SEO companies when I'm emailing them. So I have to consider that I'm passively getting in front of them. And by that, I define it that way because they haven't requested information from us at this point, but we are providing it for them. It's like an advertisement during a show that you're watching. So understanding that oftentimes if you're watching YouTube and a 7-minute ad shows up, what are you going to do the second that 15-second like timer goes up? You're going to click skip, because I'm not going to watch a 7-minute ad when I'm in the middle of watching the recap of the basketball game last night.
Yeah, right.
So keeping it short allows them to understand quickly what I'm trying to communicate to them. It helps them understand quickly what the value offering is going to be if they are willing to provide me with their time. It helps them understand that I'm only asking for a small amount of their time in exchange for that value. And it makes that decision-making process 30 seconds as opposed to, a minute to read and potentially however long it takes to respond, right? So as opposed to approaching you with, cold calling you and asking for 45 seconds of your time, I can achieve that in, 20 seconds of your time on an email, and you can know immediately whether I'm in or out. And the reason why that to me is valuable is we've talked about this since the day I started. Getting to know as quickly as you possibly can is actually a huge sales time saver. If somebody's going to say no, I don't want to talk to them for 2 hours before they say no. I want to know pretty quickly, especially with our first interaction. Is this person interested or are they not interested?
Yeah, tell me no and I can leave.
That's right. I can get out of here as soon as possible. Early on when I was doing some cold calling, we just were trying stuff out because we were calling hundreds of people a week.
Oh, yeah.
So we would call people and be like, "Do you think SEO works?" "No." "Okay, thanks." Bye.
Okay.
And we just were testing a bunch of stuff out, but messaging like that takes so much quicker than approaching somebody and saying, "Hey, can I borrow 2 minutes of your time?" and then having to be like, "Oh, well, let me go through this decision-making process. Do I want to speak to this person or not?" Right. So keeping it short allows them to get to those decisions a lot quicker, and it also is a lot less intimidating than a 250-word email.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I was talking to our VP of sales today, and he said there's 3 types of buyers. There's 10% of people who will never buy from you at all, so don't bother. There's 10% who will always buy from you. They like you, and they'll just keep buying. You keep calling, they'll keep buying whatever you sell, and there's 80% in the middle who need to be sold.
That's right.
Right? And so there's that philosophy, which is really interesting. At the same time, to that same point, kind of riffing off what you were saying, I read this book once called How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success in Sales by Frank Bettger. And in that book, he talked about this like top performing insurance rep. And most of the time, and this was back in like the 50s in Chicago, right? So there's no technology. They're not using computers, right? They're literally out swinging doors. That's right. So their marketing and sales strategy was guy in suit with briefcase, walking business to business to business, opening doors and pitching. Like that's what they did, right? And hey, that was the thing at the time. And so what this guy used to do, and so you think about it, right? But you kind of your point, hey, do you think SEO works? Yes or no? The guy's like, no. I'm like, all right, thanks. And you're right. All right, fine. But what this guy did is he would actually walk into the business and say, hey, you're probably not looking to buy insurance right now, are you? They'd be like, no, we are not looking for insurance. He's like, thanks for your time. That's what I sell. I'll leave. And they're like, okay. But he would do that like 50 times a day or 100 times a day. And then what would happen is like 1 or 2 times out of 100, he'd walk in, you guys are probably not looking to buy insurance today. Actually, no, we are in the middle and our carriers charge us too much. What do you do? Yeah. Well, I sell insurance. They're like, what kind of insurance? Well, corporate insurance. Hey, come on in. Yeah, right. Take a seat. This is the 50s, so it's probably like, would you like a martini? It's like sweet. Yeah, it's like it's 9:30 in the morning, so absolutely, right? The days have now it's like you can't smoke within all these radiuses, versus like, would you like a cigarette and a martini? It's 9 a.m. Like, sounds great. Yeah. Man, the good old days. I didn't come from that era, but can you imagine, right? It's like sitting around drinking martinis at 10 in the morning.
Yep.
So, but then what would happen is 2 of those businesses every day, the 100 doors he would swing, they'd be like, yeah, actually, I would like to hear your pitch. But he started with a negative of like, you probably don't want this, do you? So it gives him a super easy out to say, I don't want that, thank you.
That's right.
And I think that's really interesting because for a lot of reasons, but the first reason I think it's interesting is he knew the buying pool at any given moment was probably 3% of his market. And so it allowed him to very quickly get to know, so he could just move on and go to the next door. Which is interesting. And it made the engagement easy for someone who's like, dude, I don't want the lotion right now. Yeah, hey, large man in the mall, you probably, you're looking for hand lotion right now? No. Like, okay, cool. Yeah, sounds good. Probably not, right?
Yeah, right?
But then the next person walks by like, hey, are you looking for hand lotion? Actually, I was going to Bath & Body Works. We'll check this one out.
Yeah.
Right? So they're spending their time on the people who actually care versus forcing you to sit through a hand lotion pitch where you're like, I don't want lotion.
Yeah,
Right?
Right.
So I thought that's interesting. The second thing is like as like with this whole insurance pitch is if he walked into 1 or 2 businesses a day and did that, hey, you're probably not looking for insurance. No, he would be an unsuccessful salesperson.
That's right.
Right? Because he would never sell anything. But he hit 100 doors a day. Right? So he had this unique approach, which his approach was based on just like quick to know and grit of just swinging a lot of doors every day, which I thought was really interesting. So I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on like, as you've learned of this, like keeping emails really short, like what that's done for you, because you're kind of doing the same thing, right? Where it's like, do you want to talk about SEO? Yes or no? And I was like, no. Great. But then you also get some yeses too.
That's right. Yeah, honestly, what it has trained my brain to do is basically anytime I get a response, it's a good thing, right? So if I'm sending 5,000 emails a week or 2,000 emails a week or 1,000, whatever it is, volume obviously plays a significant factor there. But whenever you get a response, then it's a positive. Whether it's, hey, I can take this person off my list, or hey, this person actually is interested, or hey, this person isn't interested now, but they could be in the future, because then I can reach out and say, okay, now's not a great time for you. What about Q3? And that actually worked. There's a large retailer that we won business with basically, and it's because I sent them a cold email and they said, hey, we actually have a vendor for this, and we just got a brand new VP, so now's not a good time. And I said, okay, what about Q3? And they said, yeah, you can reach back out in Q3. And I did. I followed up in Q3, and they basically said, hey, yeah, let me introduce you to the VP. They're about 6 months in now. They've got their feet under them. Made that introduction. That VP actually passed me off to their director of marketing.
Nice.
Who then passed me off to their SEO guy. So I went through this path of like 3 or 4 different people before I met with their SEO guy. We had a 15-minute call. Kept it short and sweet. Value offering up front, and it turned into a 6-figure deal for us.
Nice.
With a really important company. So it's one of those things where the response, no matter what it is, generates a positive and momentous like reaction based on volume and based on basically keeping it pretty specific and to the point when you send those kind of short punchy emails. So it just allows you to your point to kind of get down to brass tacks pretty quickly and easily. Now the sales call, when you engage with somebody, that's the opportunity for rapport building and building a relationship and doing all that, but you don't know this person until you have an opportunity to sit down and talk with them. So worrying about upsetting them in some regard,
right,
it shouldn't be a concern of yours, because you don't know what they look like. They don't know who you are. You guys don't live next to each other. It's about figuring out, hey, is your business looking for this valuable service that we offer?
Yeah.
Yes or no?
No, that's great. And obviously, like, we focus on, with this podcast, focus on marketing, but sales is a function of marketing, right? Sales is under marketing. And I think sometimes people forget how important sales can be when thinking about marketing, because I think as marketers, we oftentimes think about, okay, let me run this ad. Let me do this trade show. Let me do this event. Let me do this thing.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, all that is to generate an interested person who then goes and talks to a salesperson.
That's right.
And one way of doing that is the salesperson themselves doing their own marketing themselves to then generate that business, right?
That's right.
So I think that's really, really smart. I also think what's interesting about kind of what you're saying there is sometimes follow-up is really key with marketing, right? It's not the one touch, right? Like it's we talked about this in marketing, but retargeting, right? You came to my site once, I never market to you again. The conversion's lower. Right. Versus you came to my site once and I follow you all around the web, and you see my brand over and over and over again, and eventually you click on it and you come and convert, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I love to hear you speak to this. When you build campaigns, right, are you emailing people once or twice? Are you emailing them 50 times? Are you emailing towards a goal of them saying yes or no? Like, how do you decide how many times to email somebody before you take them off a list?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I know that there's basically an industry kind of standard is maybe the wrong word, but an industry projection of somewhere around, I think it's like 15 touch points that generates that final response from a client. I think internally what we've seen is that there's closer to like 8 or 9 with our business that generate a response in some regard. So basically the way that I typically build cadences out is a minimum of 10 emails or phone calls or LinkedIn touch points before they move all the way through that cadence, right? And that's where you do some of the testing as well about messaging. Hey, what is this person potentially interested in? They drip over into the next campaign that offers a different value add or whatever.
Yeah.
But it is a high volume touch point, right? Because we talk about, you said it, we talk a lot about this with our clients, which is the tendency for somebody to make a purchase or to become a lead the very first time they land on your website is very rare, right? It's
super rare.
It doesn't happen that way, frankly. And attribution, different technologies show very consistently that multiple touch points are required to generate a lead in some capacity.
Yes.
Which is why we make a lot of recommendations around retargeting and multiple touch points, multiple engagements, multiple channels, digital channels to engage the users that are interested in some capacity with your products and services. And so we have to practice what we preach, right? And so from a consulting perspective, when I'm looking at my own sales funnel and I'm looking at my own pipeline, it's important for me to believe that, because otherwise I can get discouraged when just sent out this, big email campaign and nobody responded, right? It was
right.
Well, yeah, that's because it's the first time you've reached out to those people.
Yeah, and I want to say something to that, because this is why there's such a tight correlation between marketing and sales, right? We went to an event last night, right, that we were talking about, that bourbon, and there was a bourbon and cigars event, right?
That's right.
That we've got invited to. And I arrived after you guys arrived. Right, I was in the office trying to knock out work, and I looked at the calendar. I'm like, oh crap, it's already like 3:50. Right, and it's like a 30-minute drive. So I'm like, I better go, right, because this thing ended at 4:50. And I had this window, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna get a little bit of work done. You guys went earlier than me, right?
Yep.
And I think this is an interesting study to focus on. When you walked in that room, you started passing out cards, and you're connecting with people, right? Like no one, maybe a few people, but people hadn't heard of Helium.
Right.
Right. I arrived after you guys. And I didn't put on a name tag. I forgot, whatever. And, I walked over and, got a bourbon and was talking to some people. And they're like, oh, who are you with? I'm like, oh, I own a company called Helium. They're like, oh, Helium.
Yeah.
Right. And they all knew the name because you had just worked the room.
That's right.
And they were like, oh, tall guy. Like one guy was like the bodyguard. Right. I was like, yeah, sweet. And I was like, I'll tell him Scott would like that. But awesome. They were like, there's a shorter guy. And then he had a bodyguard. Yeah, right. And it was like, well, it was one of our top sales guys and his manager. But right. sure, fine. Yes, that's it was the shorter guy and the bodyguard. Yes. Yeah, he nailed it. Yeah. Man. But anyway, and so I laughed to myself because they had just had one exposure to the brand. They remembered the name Helium because it was memorable, right? And they're like, oh yeah, I've heard of you guys. Yeah. From a guy who was just here an hour ago, right? And I was like, they were, then I was like, oh, they were here, cool. But what I realized is like, that's a really simplistic example of when you send someone a cold email and they've never heard of Helium, they're like, delete.
That's
right. But when they've seen our name at events and they've seen our emails and they see us in search engine land and they see this and whatever, and then they get an email and they're like, oh, I've heard of them. And they don't know why, but their limbic brain, like, back in their brain, remembers this and they're like, I'm not afraid of this.
That's right.
Right? Versus it's like, you get emailed from some random company like, I'm afraid of this.
That's right.
They're trying to scam me, like delete.
That's right.
And so it's interesting how marketing and sales play so well together. If a salesperson just goes out there cold with a brand no one's heard of, the results are so much worse than if you sell for a brand that has name recognition. Because there's instant trust.
That's right.
Like, oh, I know your brand.
Yeah.
Right.
One of the pretty cool things that we saw early on when we started our email marketing was, like we talked about, I was here basically from the beginning, and about a year into me working at Helium, I just was goofing around and I just checked the search volume around our brand name, and it had like the Google trend around Helium SEO had like trended upwards, and it was one of those moments that kind of solidifies what you just said, which is like, we were sending out so many emails and prospecting so much that we weren't running national advertising.
No.
But our search volume around our brand name was actually trending upward because of the marketing effort that we had done, the networking that you'd done, things like that. So it's cool to see that. It's cool to see that trend upward. And then another quick example would be like we'd go to a networking event and we'd meet somebody on from Helium SEO and they'd be like, Helium SEO, Fast 55, right? 40 under 40, right? Best places to work, right? And it's just this different stuff that marketing reinforces that opportunity for a salesperson to already have that trust and already have some of that, some of that buy-in when they first engage a prospect. And email marketing is a huge part of that, a huge component of that. And that's another one of the reasons why we've always believed in it. So.
Yeah, and I want to riff off of what you just said there because we've tried to really partner or marry brand awareness plus cold email marketing plus sales plus traditional, like adding all the marketing together, right? And then we do our own SEO, we do our own ads, right? So that and we saw this the other day where people said, well, I hadn't heard of you, but then I Googled SEO Cincinnati, you popped at the very top. Like, well, that's search marketing working.
That's right.
And then they say, oh, you're local and you win these awards, and all the stuff like falls in place, right? And this is why it's so key with marketing. You have to do so many different things because you never know how people are going to find you.
Right.
But one thing I wanted to say about that and kind of hit all those pieces is, as we're doing email marketing, we're thinking about branding. One really good thing I learned from my CEO coach is the power of press and the power of your brand with awards, right? And so one of the reasons why we are involved in so many award ceremonies and all these different awards is that it's actually really, really good exposure for the brand.
Yeah.
And I always kind of wondered, like, how do these companies get so many awards, right? It's because they apply for everything.
That's right.
And they win some, and it's a game. But yet we have won so much business through just being in these award shows and ceremonies because people get exposed to the brand. Like, oh, Helium SEO, right? And I didn't understand that before until my coach explained to me. He's like, you got to go for every free press opportunity, every award you possibly can, whether you win or not. Because just being a finalist and just getting there, the exposure is phenomenal.
Yeah, that's cool.
And so it's really, I mean, he's right. And then, of course, you can stack these things, right? So that you can retarget, so let's say you're on Fast 55 or, we were Inc. 5000 last year, whatever. Then you put that on the site and people see that. But then when you retarget them, they remember the brand and the ink. And then when the salesperson sends them a cold email, they remember all that. And just all snowballs towards credibility, right?
Yep.
Because ultimately what we're trying to do with our marketing and our sales is we're trying to go from I don't know you to I trust you. That's right. Because people do business with those people they trust.
Yep, that's right.
So it's just interesting, and I appreciate your thoughts and insights. I love you do this all the time. Other thoughts on email marketing, for the people listening. What are things you've seen that have worked really well? What are things you've seen that hasn't worked? And what are some takeaways for the people listening?
Yeah, that's another great question. We've been doing it it's been our main lead source for basically 5 years now, right?
Yeah.
So there's been ebbs and flows of it, and most of the time, I'll speak to one of the things that you brought up earlier, but most of the time you're emailing somebody completely cold out of the blue, right? What I've basically uncovered, not a huge trade secret, but being able to be persistent without pushy and annoying is kind of crucial when you're doing email marketing. Because one of the things that you and Andrew both have been very intentional about is communicating to the whole sales team that text and emailing is toneless. Nobody can tell the tone that you're emailing them in, right?
Right.
So when you send somebody an email that basically says something to the extent of like, hey, find a time on my calendar and we'll connect. I have always looked at that as being, as basically communicating that you don't really care about my time. If you tell me, hey, let's meet, and I'm like, okay, what works? And you tell me then, check my calendar for me. What it says to me is you're asking me to find your time that's available when you wanted to meet with me, right? And so understanding, that's just an example, but understanding how to communicate with somebody via email in a way that's respectful, that acknowledges that their time is very valuable, that also acknowledges that you are acknowledging that and offering value up front is crucial, right? So take a warm email. You had mentioned it before, right? Warm email. When you make an introduction to me, hey, Dave, Jim, whatever, nice to meet you. I want to introduce you to Scott. He's one of our sales reps.
Yep.
He'd love to walk you through this. Usually I'll Slack you and be like, hey, how do you want me to navigate this? But more often than not, I need to send them an email that probably doesn't offer them a pair of AirPods or ask for just 15 minutes. I'm probably going to ask for a full hour up front, right?
Yeah.
Because I know that it's already warm. I know that I have a little more trust and buy-in because you've met them and you're introducing me.
Yep.
The second piece of that is oftentimes these are CEOs or people that sit on the C-suite.
Yep.
So I need to appreciate their time and acknowledge that it's valuable, but I also need to be aware that it's probably going to take me 2 to 3 emails to get them to agree to a meeting.
Right.
To get them to actually book the time. And
to your point, you need to add value first.
Exactly.
Right.
And oftentimes you're probably going to end up getting, their executive assistant, and they're be the ones that kind of coordinate calendars, which again is perfectly fine. But that's why it's so important to understand, like, how do you navigate that process without it coming across as pushy, without it coming across as, check my calendar for my availability, when it's like, no, you're talking to a CEO. Like, you need to tell him when you're available, and you need to encourage him and make it as easy as possible, but also let him know that you're going to lead with value. You got to balance all that in an email. And that's something that, again, I've tried to be very, very specific and intentional about over these last couple of years, is getting better at email. We had a rep that, I remember he sent an email out to like set up a meeting or whatever. It was using words like y'all and different things. And I just remember being like, that feels really informal. And in this capacity, it could be interpreted as disrespectful, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why it's important to know, like, hey, if I'm going to be casual with somebody, I need to understand if I have the trust to be able to do that. And you just can't take chances in an email if you haven't met the person before. So that's another kind of piece of that can roll into however you email communicate, right? Whether it's somebody that has been a client of yours for 5 years, or whether it's somebody that, you know, is a cold prospect. Understanding like how can I be universal in this email that isn't in a way offensive in any regard or disrespectful in any regard. You know, I need to be careful of that too.
No, I think it's really good, and I think I would pass along like one thing about email marketing, some like my takeaways or like lessons I've learned. Number one, say it in as few words as possible. So don't make the email 5 paragraphs if you can make it 5 words.
That's right.
Right. So if the email can really be, would you like SEO help? Thanks, Tim. Right?
Right.
That's better than, hey, let me explain to you these 5 services our company offers. It's like, dude, just like they don't want that, right?
That's right.
Unless the guy responds and says, yes, but what are the services you offer? Well, let me give you some more, right?
That's
or, hey, it's a great question. Can we meet for 15 minutes versus me sending you a book, right? So it's thinking about people's time and actually caring about your neighbor versus, you know, wasting their time sending them stuff they want, like thinking through what's best for them. So say it in as few words as possible. Number 2 is I would say, think about your own email and that little window you've got, subject line and like those first 8 words. That is my decision-making window, right?
Yes.
So if you think about like a website, you visit a website, like what's on the top of the site for me to be interested in, right? If you have some video that's like really off-putting, be like, and then I just leave, right? Probably get rid of that video.
That's right.
Right? Or, you know, there's like, I've been to some websites where you go to the site and then you look around and you're like, what do you do exactly? Right. And then they have an explainer video that's like, oh, we do this, this, and this. You're like, oh, that makes a lot more sense. I could not figure out from your
Problem
site.
solving.
Well, creativity, synergies. Like,
right.
But what do you guys do? Oh, we sell bathroom supplies.
That's right.
Got it. Okay.
That's right.
You're a janitorial company. Well, we creatively solve, custodial issues.
That's right.
So you sell janitorial supplies. Yes, we sell janitorial. Okay, yeah, that's great. You're cheaper, but yeah, I got it, right? Like, can you put that on your site somewhere? It's like really confusing, right? I don't need to understand the synergies of my building management. What do you do? So, but you know, back to the other one, like try to get to the point as quickly as possible and keep it as short as possible.
Yep.
And then for me, like always have that call to action, right? You know, have a good, quick call to action. And we talked to brands about this, but it's the same with email marketing. Like in that little window, that little snippet, I'm going to look at that and try to figure out whether I even want to open this email or not. You know, try to have it where that call to action is really early on in the email, so people know like, why are you emailing? What's the point? What are we driving towards? That's right. Do I want to do this or do I not want to do this? And I think people appreciate that because one piece of advice I heard from Steli Efti, who runs Close.com, is most executives are going to be reading your email on an iPhone in the back of an Uber while traveling to and from meetings. And can I open on my iPhone and within 2 seconds decide to say yes or no? And if I can't, they probably just delete it and move on.
That's right.
And I thought that was really good advice. Yeah. And I will say I've seen with email marketing, if you can keep it really short, really concise, so the person, you know, can read it in 2 seconds on an iPhone and just you know, respond yes or no, works really well.
Yeah. No, that's exactly why we do it the way that we do it. Because we know that we're asking for valuable time, and if you're sitting in the back of an Uber, I don't want to, maximize.
Like,
That is not the sales rep I want to be, right?
Yeah.
So that's why we try to be intentional about that.
No, man. Well, Scott, thanks for coming on and talking about email marketing. Really appreciate.
Yeah.
If people want to get a hold of you or want to pick your brain more about, you know, sales and marketing together or the cold emailing process during marketing, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. Scott, Sutter is spelled wrong. I always tell people my last name is spelled Sutter, so it looks like Sutter, but it's actually Suter. And then my email address is pretty straightforward: scott.sutter@helium-seo.com. One of the things I tell people all the time is I live kind of in this wonderful window of communication and technology, and I'm passionate about both of them. So I try to be as generous with my time as I possibly can. So, having discussions and consulting on this different stuff, I try to approach every conversation without a hard sell, mainly because I know that there's limitless possibility through networking and connecting points with individuals that can understand the value that we offer, understand our passion about helping, and potentially either refer us or bring us in as part of their vendor list.
That's great. Well, Scott, thanks for coming on, man. I really appreciate your time.
For sure.
Guys, you've been listening to the It's All Just Marketing podcast. I'm your host, Tim Warren, and we'll see you guys on the next one.